What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Devy YouTube channel. I am your host, as always, Kevin Coleman, and we are back with a 2023 rookie mock. But for this one, we had a little fun with this one, and we did a draft capital mock. So we looked at a mock draft, 7-round mock draft, where all of these guys went. We gave draft capital, we gave landing spot, and we're diving into, based on those landing spots, how would we draft this rookie class? So this was a lot of fun, and it's a good experiment to look at and see how much draft capital and landing spot really changes kind of these outlooks that we got. So let's dive into it. All right, let's get into it. So as you can see right there, we got Bryce Young, and we're going to be talking about kind of where these guys go. So again, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to show you the first round right now. So let's dive into the first round, the first 6 picks. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you where they went. So you see right there where they got drafted by, what team they got drafted by, and I'm going to give you guys their draft capital, right? So Bijan Robinson went to Atlanta, first round draft capital, top 10 pick. CJ Stroud went 101. He went first to the Texans. Jahmyr Gibbs goes in the first round to the Eagles. Then we have Bryce Young. He goes to the Panthers in the first round as well. Quentin Johnston, he goes to the Texans in the first round, and then Zach Evans goes to the Panthers. So when we're looking at just in terms of draft capital, and the Panthers was a second-round pick, so we're looking at second-round draft capital there. So when we're looking at the mock draft board, I mean, I think overall, when you're just looking at this, Bijan Robinson is kind of going to be slotted in as the 101. I think no matter what, if he gets going to get first-round draft capital, if you built your team to where they're going to compete next year, I think Bijan's the play. Now, if your team's way off and you're like, hey, I think I need to trade out of there, you probably can and have someone come up and get him. But again, you should be, hopefully you rebuild and you rebuild to this point where you're not just rebuilding like 3 or 4 years down the road. If you're going to get Bijan at 101, make sure you're competing in the next 2 years. I think that's the value there. Now with CJ and Gibbs, and I think the biggest thing is CJ goes to the 102, I think because he went at the first pick. And then you have Gibbs. He popped up to the 103, first round draft capital to the Eagles. And we see what Miles Sanders is doing. What if they don't replace him again with him, right? If they don't bring Miles Sanders back, I think that's an interesting one. I think the one that slipped a little bit was Bryce. So we know this is an interesting mock to where Bryce didn't go at the 101 like we've been seeing, and he's going to slip to 4. And I think that's a pretty good value there. And we got together guys here, and Bo made this pick. We're going to get into guys who was in this draft, but just overall, I think Bryce being there, I think that's an interesting value there. Quentin Johnston is the first wide receiver off the board, and going to the Texans, pairing himself with CJ Stroud, that could be an interesting pairing, and that could be a fun pairing, right? When we're talking about we're going to talk about where the other receivers landed in draft capital. You're going to see that's why kind of Quentin got bumped up, and then Zach Evans, and I'm writing a piece right now for Football Guys about the running back class. He is the biggest outlier, right? Like when we're seeing draft capital, we see him all across the board, but in this draft, he got second round draft capital. If he gets second round draft capital and goes to a team like the Panthers, one of these areas, I think that's a hell of a value, and I think he's going to be in this top 6 picks, right? Now, I do want to do a player spotlight for each one of these as we kind of go through. And I think the guy that I want to stand out to me is Jahmyr Gibbs. So when we're talking about what Jahmyr Gibbs has done in college, we see the numbers there: 850 yards rushing, 7 touchdowns, 378 yards, and 3 touchdowns this year for Alabama. He was at obviously Georgia Tech before then. So we expected him maybe to get a little bit more, production, right? He didn't really have that. Now we've seen it. He's efficient, but we haven't seen that kind of, okay, let's step up. You're at Alabama. What are you, right? So when we're talking about what his strengths are, and again, I've been kind of writing these up. Hands is number 1. I mean, he was probably the best pass catcher on Alabama's team. I mean, to be completely honest, with that receiving core, the way they were. So we know he has that. He has that playmaking. He has that speed. And when he gets it out there, you love when he can take it off. If you're going to watch any game of his, go watch the Arkansas tape. When you go watch the Arkansas tape, his full, potentials on that board right there. And in vision, I think he has very good vision as a runner. He's game-changing ability and full display. Was against the Razorbacks there. He became more efficient at Alabama, in my opinion, for his strengths. And so when you're looking at those type of things, you like to see that, right? And if he gets first-round draft capital to the Eagles, you're going to be all aboard. Now, things against him a little bit. I think his size is the biggest one. 200 pounds listed. And again, we all list ourselves a little bit, under where we're at. Where does Gibbs at, right? What is he going to be? If he's under that 200, if he's sub 200, I think you got to really take a long, hard look. Will he be in that top 5 picks for you? I think that's the question mark. And then consistency, I think it's the other one before I get into pass blocking. He's been consistent when you saw the numbers that I just showed you, but we haven't seen the big consistency. We haven't seen him get 1,000 yards rushing. Now, he's a dual threat kid, so he's going to get those pass catching, but if we haven't seen that consistency be of a high production back. We've seen an average production back. So does that worry you at the next level? And I think pass blocking, I know everybody mentions it and everybody says whatever, it doesn't matter. He got outright taken out and benched in games. Like the Texas game this year, he got benched because of his pass blocking. So I think that's something to like be aware of when we're talking about Gibbs too. Like this isn't somebody that's just going to, step on the field. He's going to have to learn a little bit there. And if he can't be a good pass blocker, he's not going to be on third down situations, right? And I think that's what's he's going to be his skill. That's going to be his advantage as a pass catcher. So this is something to know about with him. But again, you get him at the 103 in this mock, and I think that's interesting. Now, the next 6 picks here, we got Anthony Richardson at the 107. Now, this is an outlier. This is the fun part. Anthony Richardson went at the 107. My guy Tommy Garrett from PFN took him there, and I love it because Tommy's a good guy and he knows what he's doing. But he got second-round draft capital. So the difference between him is he got second-round draft capital to the Giants, not first-round draft capital. JSN actually got first-round draft capital. So when you're looking at Jackson Smith-Njigba there, he goes first to the Giants. So they kind of pair up on some athletes there. I think those are interesting pairings. You got Anthony Richardson getting second-round draft capital going to the top 7. That just shows his potential, right? That just shows, okay, they believe in those skills and those type of things. Then you got Jackson Smith-Njigba at the 108. Again, I like it. First-round draft capital to the Giants. If they pair him with like Anthony Richardson, does that hurt him? I think this is why he slipped to 108, why Quentin went first. Michael Mayer went to the Green Bay Packers, first-round draft capital. Again, they need pass catchers. Maybe they say, hey, Christian Watson's that guy. Maybe they go dress in free agency and they get Michael Mayer there. Jordan Addison slips to the 110. And the big reason why, and was talked about in the chat, New England Patriots, first-round draft capital. I think seeing what Mac Jones, they got to get a better receiver room. We see that. We saw that in the recent weeks, right, against the Las Vegas Raiders. Addison goes there. Does that limit his ceiling, right? When we're thinking of what he can do, Mac Jones cannot throw it deep. Maybe, hey, over the middle, those type of things that we can see from them. But again, where is that going to be? Then Sean Tucker, who just declared this last week, he went to the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think that's a juicy landing spot for him in terms of where they're at. Second-round draft capital, 111. That's probably a value. And then maybe a little bit of a shock here, but Zach Charbonnet, he went to the Dolphins. And I think that's a fun pick because when you're thinking of like, where's Zach going to go? That's a second-round draft capital in this mock draft that someone wrote. So when you're looking at that, Charbonnet's coming in as one of the best prospects that we've seen in a long time. From a senior, right? Redshirt junior, senior, whatever, COVID year. So we're looking at an older prospect here and just best prospect of that older, hey, not coming out as a junior. So what is he, right? What are we going to do with Zach? Because Zach's a very solid runner, but if he finds himself in the Miami Dolphins, offense and where they at, I mean, I think that could be a home run pick there in the first round. And that's going to push some other guys down to that second round where the value is going to be had. Now, I just want to spotlight one player real quick. And that's Michael Mayer, just in terms of what he's been able to do. And I think the prospect wise, and again, when we're thinking of what this draft was, I mean, is that a little early? So if we're thinking tight end premium, should we be okay with that? So this is tight end premium draft. So when we're thinking of Michael Mayer being at the 109, I don't hate that pick, especially being in Green Bay. I mean, that's immediate production right there. I think that, Aaron's going to be there another year, more than likely. So when we're looking at that, we don't have to worry about the quarterback position, but he could be, again, when you're looking at tight ends and we're projecting tight ends in fantasy, we're looking at, are they the top 2 pass catchers in that offense? He could be instantly, right? So some things he does well, strength. I mean, we're going to see that his rush, his pass blocking, run blocking, all those things. Like he came in ready to go. His route running is actually not too bad. He can actually create some separation. He doesn't always create separation, but I think he's nuanced enough to find holes in the zone, find a hole, against man-to-man coverage, understand, leverage, do those type of things. Like those are the things that Mayer does pretty well. And that's, I think, one area to highlight. Now, as far as things that I think people are a little bit concerned about is his athleticism. He better not run. So speed, RAS score, all that stuff is going to be tied in. So if you guys don't know what RAS score is, it's relative athletic score. Kentley Plate, I think is how you say his last name. He created this. It's called RAS. And really, they look for like just, athletic testing at their size. What are they? So tight ends who test higher in this metric tend to perform better in NFL and fantasy. And what ties into that is athleticism and speed. And so I think one thing is going to question about what is that going to be? And I think that's the biggest thing going in his draft capital for Michael Mayer. Can he kind of represent, like, can he get up in that upper echelon of like, hey, tight ends, athleticism, those things? Like think of Jelani Woods, these other guys that kind of popped off in that score. Teams use this. And so I think that could be the concern with him going forward. But as far as tight end premium, being a top, first round draft capital, being a top 2 pass catcher in that offense. I don't hate it. I think that's an interesting pick there. So let's go to the second round now. So here's where we got in second round. So this is where we're going to start getting to see the depth of this class and where it's at. So Joshua Downs with a 201. So I took him there. North Carolina kid. He went to Texans as well. So they revamped their offense, right? When we were thinking what the Texans did in this draft, they got CJ Stroud and they went and got Quentin Johnson. And they said, okay, we're just going to get Joshua Downs too. And I don't know if they'll do that. It probably depends on Brandon Cooks. We kind of talked about it. But hey, if he's going to be in that offense, I'll take him at the 201. I think the biggest thing is Will Levis going to the 202. So Will Levis got first round draft capital to the Indianapolis Colts. And then he goes in the second round. And I think this is a bunch of smart guys in this draft. And I think that's the question mark. I think it's a value in the second round, right? In Superflex Dynasty, I'll take Will Levis. I'll take the shot on them. I think people are concerned about, and rightfully so, what he is. Now, we're going to spotlight him later, so I'm not going to dive too much into that. But I thought it was interesting that Anthony Richardson went in the first round at the 107, while Levis went at the 202, but the draft capital was basically flipped, right? Levis got the first round draft capital, top 15, and then Anthony Richardson went in the second round. So that's something to note, I think, when we're talking about these prospects. Then we got Tank Bigsby. I think he's going to value, but he went to the Raiders, and people were upset about where his draft capital was there. But he went to the Raiders, and what are they going to do moving forward, right? With Josh Jacobs, he's looked great. He went in the third round here, so he's got third round draft capital. Cedric Tillman to the Green Bay at 204, and I think that would be a fun pick for them. He went in the second round there. So again, go on Mayer, Tillman. I think Tillman is a very solid prospect. He's someone to look at, especially if you're not really familiar with Tennessee. Then you have Dalton Kincaid, senior Utah tight end. He looked good. He went to the Bengals. Hey, they could use that. Imagine that offense with Kincaid, what he's been able to do, kind of the level that he's had there. And people forget, Kincaid has had a hell of a production, especially, he's a fifth-year guy, though. He was at San Diego. He just started playing. His potential's there. This year, Utah, 890 yards, 8 touchdowns. Again, if you want to know a little bit more about him, I wrote about him in my Football Guys article. And then you got Rashee Rice rounding out the top 206, and Rashee getting up in that 206 range. I think this was as high as I've seen him go in terms of his mocks. But again, went to Denver. What do you think of Denver in terms of what they are next year, right? What are they going to do in that offense? And I think that's the biggest question mark with this pick. What is Russell Wilson, right? What is this going to be? But he got first round draft capital. So at 206, you're getting a kid that got first round draft capital. Broncos felt like they need to go get that receiver room, get that kind of over the top guy. Hey, maybe that's the case. So first round draft capital receiver at the 206 mark. I don't hate it, right? Now, I just want to spotlight one guy, and obviously we're going to spotlight Will Levis. Now, this is what his numbers were this year. He declared, so he's coming out. He's going to miss his bowl game. 2,400 yards, 19 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. So when we're thinking of Levis as a quarterback, what does he do well? So first, tools, right? He's got the tools. That's the number one thing you're going to hear from everybody, scouts, everybody. You're going to be hearing all this. You're going to hear him say, oh, he's the first guy, should be off the board, all this stuff. So tools. He's got arm strength. Like, there's no denying that that's part of his tools, is his arm strength. And he does have that leadership quality. Like, when you're talking to everybody at Kentucky and what he's done, like, he has intangibles, right? Like, when he checks those marks, tools, arm strength, and any intangible stuff, and the leadership qualities and all that. So we know that he has that. Now, here's the question marks, and this is the biggest thing I have about him. I think that he really struggles with awareness. So when I broke him down for my Football Guys article and I talked about it, and I've watched this kid for, 4 years, like basically since he's been here. This is the biggest part of my job at Football Guys and this channel is going through these prospects and looking at them. And I think that my biggest thing is like his inconsistencies throughout his entire game. His awareness, I think he struggles with. He plays very good against good competition, but against higher level competitions, like he just struggles with that. He tends to lock onto his pre-snap reads. Many of his bad throws come from his unwillingness to check into other routes. He kind of relies on that arm strength too much. He also hesitates on throws. Those timing issues will cause significant issues for him at the next level, though. So he has these anticipation issues. He locks on guys. Then he has timing issues, doesn't get it out when he needs to. He really has struggled with certain receivers. He did really good with Wan'Dale Robinson, but a lot of that stuff was yards after the catch, right? So we haven't seen that. So I think that's the biggest concern with Levis moving forward is what is he, right? What is he going to be at the next level? But those are the concerns. So I get why he dropped to that second round, right? When we're talking about draft capital, where it was at. Now, the round out this next second round here, it's, next part of the second round, Kendre Miller, running back from TCU, 6 foot 220. Thinking of him, he went to the Ravens, and I think the Ravens are an interesting spot. They're going to probably add a running back in this depth in this class just to kind of go behind Dobbins. We've seen too many injuries in that backfield with too many unknowns. So Kendre going there, I think, would be interesting in terms of like just his product, what he is out there on the field. Like what can he be moving forward? He got drafted in the third round. He got third round draft capital, and then they grabbed Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee. So they're kind of focused on that. We've seen that wide receiver room. They got to get weapons in that wide receiver room. And I think, especially with Bateman being out this year, there was some true deficiencies there. They took highlight in the first round. So you get first round draft capital at 208. But again, I think he drops because of what we've seen in that Ravens offense. And we haven't seen the pass catching there. Then Devin Chain at 209. Again, he went to the Cardinals, which I think again is a really fun landing spot for these guys. So okay, what do we like there? Probably a new coach, maybe depending on there. Went a third round draft capital, so we got that second day. Hey, he's going on the second day in the draft, so we like that. We don't like if he fall out of that, right? Then Darnell Washington, remember this is tight end premium. He went to the Titans. Will they move with him? Chig is doing pretty good there. So, but in this mock, hey, he went to Darnell Washington in the second round to Tennessee. Blake Corum, Texans. All right, if Blake's going to come out, he hasn't officially declared yet. But hey, I like that with the Texans. They're trying to revamp that running back room. They have a kind of a 1-2 punch with him and Dameon Pierce. What is that going to be, right? Late second round. How would you like that? I think that is the interesting part about these landing spots is that this happens every year in the drafts. This is a third round draft capital for the Texans. Would they race a third round pick after drafting Dameon Pierce? What does that look like? We saw Tennessee do that with ETN. We've seen these guys do that. This happens. And then rounding out the second round is Chase Brown. 5'11", 205-pound running back out of Illinois. And again, looking at him, he went third round to the Denver Broncos. They're probably going to have to shore up their backfield because Javonte Williams is out with that ACL. What is that going to look like? Chase Brown could be an interesting fit there. Now, I want to spotlight Jalen Hyatt. We're just going to go through him real quick. 6', 180. Again, obviously had a great outlier year this year. He looked amazing, 1,200 yards, 15 touchdowns. He looked great. Okay, so that's the question. What does he do well? So what would he do well in that offense with Lamar if he was in Baltimore and all those things, right? So first things first, vertical threat. Okay, he's got that. He's that guy. He's going to have that acceleration, that speed. So straight line speed, he's got it. Acceleration off the line, he's got it as long as he doesn't get bumped. Vertical threat, he's there. So he would actually add to that, right? So Jalen Hyatt would be an excellent addition to that team, especially because he can kind of do that a little bit nuanced more than Rashad, right? Him and Rashad would probably work pretty well together if Lamar could show the accuracy to get it there. Now, things that you worry about with him, size, a little bit on the smaller side. Release, he gets bumped off a lot. We really didn't see that. He had a lot of free releases, a lot of broken down plays where he had those things. So we haven't seen him really get bumped and covered and all those type of things that NFL teams are going to do, not necessarily college teams. And I think the biggest question mark and the things that I see from a lot of people is he just a system player? Like, is he just the Tennessee Volunteers? We saw that for 2 years, and boom, he comes into this offense. He has it there. Hey, now he looks like he's the guy. Cedric Tillman was a little banged up all year. Who is the better receiver of this crew? I know he's a Blitnikoff award winner, but Tillman be that guy, right? So those are the biggest question marks here. And I think, but get him at the, in the second round, in the second half of the second round, like where he's at. I think that's a value if he's got first round draft capital, right? I just worry about the Ravens and where they're at. Now, third round, wrap up the third round. We're just going to go through all the picks. So I took tight end Luke Musgrave. I think that's a guy that you really need to be aware of. Oregon State, he got third round draft capital. He's kind of my guy in this class so far. Go take a look at my article. I wrote a lot about him. He could be value there at the tight end position. He's getting really good buzz in terms of where his draft capital is going to be. Marvin Mims went to, Dallas Cowboys. And again, when you talk about Marvin Mims, will he come out? What does that look like? I think those are real question marks that we have to know. But he went in the fourth round. So he didn't, fourth round draft capital, but he still goes to the 302 because of the landing spot that he got to. Hendon Hooker to the Saints. I think that's a great pick because they're going to have to move on. They're probably not going to have the draft pick to go get a top guy in this draft. So maybe they take Hendon Hooker, older quarterback, maybe can step in there after his ACL. What does that look like, right? Will they go do that? So he went to the Saints in the third round. A.T. Perry went to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, looking at that, he went to them in the third round there, which we've seen Trevor Lawrence kind of bounce out. Could he be that next guy? Zay Flowers to Seattle, probably to take over Tyler Lockett's spot. So we're thinking, hey, maybe he's going to step in. I really like this. We've talked about Zay. We've done him on our Patreon. We've done all kinds of different episodes there. So seeing him go there to Seattle in the second round. So you got second round draft capital, getting at 305. Not bad. Rashawn Johnson, we're going to highlight him going to the Saints. Again, Texas running back, not named Bijan, going in the fourth round. Raheem Jarrett, Minnesota Vikings at the 307. So, hey, he's going to come in there, get Thielen. He has Jefferson on the other side. I think Raheem is going to be better than he was in college in terms of what he's production-wise. He went to the third round for the Vikings, so that's interesting. Then rounding out the last few picks here, Sam Laporta went to the Saints. They might not make that move with how Jerome Johnson's looking, but hey, if he goes there, you could be talking about it's a good tight end premium spot. Jaron Hall to Seahawks because they passed on quarterback up until that point. So maybe, hey, I wrote about him, BYU quarterback. He has some potential there. Kenny McIntosh for Georgia going to the Vikings. Kendall Milton to the Bengals. And then Xavier Hutchinson LA. So again, where he's at, 7th-round pick for LA Rams, but in terms of that value. Now, just real quick, highlight Rashawn Johnson. I think this is a name you need to know just in terms of what he can do. Good pass catcher, very big size, speed, kind of acceleration, those type of things. 6'2", 223. We'd know more about him had he not been playing behind Bijan. But receiving size, versatility, I think he can move inside and out in terms of like as a running back. I will say, just thinking about what he can do out there, I think he's a third down guy with that size. I love that because he can go score in the red zone and do those type of things. We don't usually see guys like this. Now, I think people and scouts highlight is that lack of athleticism, explosiveness, and agility in the open field. But downhill runner, yes, he has that. So I think Roschon is someone that you should be watching in terms of draft capital where he's at. 4th, 5th, 6th round is kind of where he's getting projection right now, but he is going to the Senior Bowl. So if he goes to the Senior Bowl and he balls out, we could see that that we've seen this happen times and times again. Senior Bowl, boom, draft capital goes up. Okay, and then we go see him there. We see his projects there. So that was the mock draft. So I hope you had some fun with this like we did. We went through here, got some mock draft data, draft capital. I think it's going to be fun. We always know that people, as fantasy, we hate it because they always screw us over in terms of like, oh, he went behind him. We see his bad draft slots and we're like, oh, that's going to kill his value. So we see that. So I thought it was an interesting exercise. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. Hit that like and subscribe button. Leave a comment. Would you take Levis in the first round if he's there? What do you think about Anthony Richardson going top 7? How do you like that? And please, hit that like and subscribe button for us. Let us know how we're doing. We appreciate you guys. We'll check you guys next time.